Important birthday?
105.
Uh-huh.
I still feel like a young guy.
That's the trick of life, isn't it? We don't feel what people tell us our age is.
Only 75.
Hi, Sante.
Hi, Janice.
I'm going to welcome you all. We're going to do quick. One is I have a timer. I think that is Marie Lianza and her daughter. I have a set of basic agreements that are going to be sent over to the chat so you can look at, because what we want to do is see if you all agree that we can run the meeting on some of these or all of these or none of these if you decide to vote. But we want to have one of the reasons that the Women's Committee is having this discussion is to see if we can actually have a very thoughtful, pleasant discussion about a topic that seems to have had considerable amount of conflict and disagreement. So that is one of the goals. So that if we can't do that, we'll just discontinue the meeting. I said I'm too old for having some wild meeting right now, as wild as I am. But also, I want to just say, as the chair of the Women's Issue Committee, that and Sante is here. I think you're still co-doing this meeting with us, Sante, or did you? Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I'll do anything with you, Janice.
Thank you.
So
For the
any meeting you want.
outreach group is
Outreach.
that some of us are concerned that there's a level of way that people are taking on their differences in the Williamsburg Greenpoint area that is really being very hurtful, and it's really good people um, jumping on good people. And we have seen 4 years of Trump, and I am, for one, trying not to have any more of those kinds of events where people can't talk. And I even had to listen to my son the other day tell me all kinds of things that he didn't like about my parenting. And I really worked hard at listening and not trying to point out where he was wrong. So I'm trying to model it my own self because obviously I'm a pretty feisty person. But that's the goal tonight is to take on the issue of open streets and to talk about what, now that it's here, whether we like it or not, it's here. What do we think the protocol should be? How should this be operated? Because obviously things have happened that have not been what people decided. People, it has been, some of it's been top down and has created a lot of conflict. And I don't need to try to characterize the conflict because I see Ben is here and other people that have worked very hard. So there are people that have worked very hard on the issue. And then there are people that feel that that the issue was forced on them and it was not what they wanted. And, but now we know that we are coming out of COVID, and I'm one of the ones that saw that when the COVID was going on, that it was just wonderful to step outside somewhere because there wasn't places to step, So now that we've clarified we need to step out, how and under what circumstances and who gets to decide. And this issue keeps coming up, and it'll be the last of my sermon, is that it goes like the plastic park. Who decides, who decided on that park? The state thinks that they get to decide what happens, even if it's in our neighborhood. That is the rules right now. So I think new legislation is being taken forward to the state to try to have it that in the future, state-run projects that are in our local community have to be reviewed by the local community. So I fall on, and most of the people I know that are part of the Women's Issues Committee fall on the side that that the people in the community should have a lot to say about what happens and doesn't happen. And as you know, we spent 3 years trying to get 1 extra hour for women's swim at the Metropolitan Pool, so we don't look too successful right now. But you get kind of the idea that we actually do think that the people that use something should have something to say. So on that, I'm going to move now over to the chat, if you can, and we'll quickly, and Jane, no, Maria is doing timing. What was Jane supposed to do? Oh, Jane, can you read the basic agreements? You see it in the chat? Or anybody that can see them, that little print?
I can
No?
read it.
Okay,
Uh,
who's that?
Deborah
Okay,
Starr.
thank you, Deborah. Even if
You're
you're not a
welcome.
social worker, please do.
Okay. Number one, full attention. We listen respectfully, give each leader our full attention. Number two, full participation. We encourage everyone to speak in respect when others pass. Three, we stay with the group task and stick with agreed upon agenda. Four, speak from our own experiences using I statements, not we or they. Five, no put downs of ourselves or others. Six, no advice. We do not comment on each other's contribution or give advice unless requested. Seven, respect time limits. We strive to give everyone equal time. Eight, appreciations. We share appreciations of each other and use LSP participatory meeting methods. We try to share good news before bad.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for
Now-
reading that.
Thank you. Now, can people, this is what you're now being asked to do. You're being asked to reflect on those points. Do you want to take anything out of it or add anything to it?
I think it sounds fantastic.
I would
Any-
like to, a potential one adding, it says no advice. One thing that I would like to say is someone to be allowed to ask let the group know that they have an opinion about something that's on topic and would like to, if that would be okay. And then someone can say yes or no.
Okay, people accept that? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, you're sounding very faint to me. That's why I'm sounding that way. Okay, anybody else have a thing they want to add?
Sounds good.
We have 110 organizations around the world that have spent the last 25 years having to develop, and neighborhood women having to develop those rules because we had so much conflict ourselves. So believe me, it doesn't come out of some little intellectual thing there. But would you accept being these rules for this meeting?
Yes.
Right, and is there anybody that will not accept it? Because it means that you can be called on if you're not following the rules. Nobody? Everybody's accept, okay.
Just one more thing, I'm sorry. Which is, you have to be called upon. Do we say that in there?
Yeah, no, we didn't. So Marty's saying is that that will ruin my whole life, Marty, but we should add into the agreements that since I never wait to be called on, that people should be called on before they speak.
And
Take turns,
the meeting chair.
which means I still get to do it. Right. Okay, is that all right? Marty's thing? Okay.
I think
So-
I know how to do that. We'll see how to do the call on thing. I'm not very experienced with this and I'm using my phone. So anyway,
Right, obviously, we're not looking to chastise people. We're looking to try to create a culture of people that have all been, and I know a lot of the people on the phone are longtime activists and care about the community we live in. That is what we're about. And how we're doing the meeting tonight, and you saw the agenda, but people can respond um, to the agenda if you can do that quickly, because we have, it's 6:12, we have limited time. Anybody, and you saw how we're doing it, is that and I have a friend of mine here from UN Habitat to kick off, who's actually a bit anxious about that, right, Andrew?
Yeah, you
Don't
could
hear
say
him.
that. You've always
Yeah.
got your pulse on the mood of the moment, Jen.
Do I?
Definitely.
Okay, I need it to be a little bit. So we want to look at, first we want to just look a little bit at the fact that the issue of space and public space is a very big issue in the world that we live in, and particularly in cities all over the world. And my organization, Wiro Commission, is very actively involved in the UN, besides locally here in Williamsburg. And so I've asked Andrew, just because I think that it's important that this context of what we are battling about, it's like we've gotten obviously for years we've been fighting about affordable housing. That's a global issue. Well, public space is the global issue, but what is public and what do we mean by space? And how did that issue become such a big issue? And how does that relate? I'm not trying to have an intellectualizing meeting, but I thought it was still a little bit important to try to remind people where all this is coming from and how people all over the world, particularly the cities networks like the UCLG, United Cities, and local leadership, are all working on the issue of space and having huge conferences and meetings. And some of you that are working on parks and space actually might want to begin to link your work up with the United Nations. We are sitting in the city that is saying it's working with the United Nations. So you might like to know that. But I'm going to, and so the next part was, and I don't know if Saskia, are you here? Yeah, I can see on the side, but I'm not seeing her. So we'll see. But there is a series of people we were trying to bring in. Saskia from the Heights, Prospect Heights group that had worked on open space, open streets. And I don't know if she's here or not here, or this message got to her or not, but that's the way the intention is. And then we have Eric, who's been on the front lines of all of this discussion. We're trying to give him a rest. He only gets to listen for some of the time and to be an expert tonight. All he has to do is be an expert about where are we at in Williamsburg Greenpoint, and then we're trying to treat also the other person that's been getting beaten up quite a bit lately is Sante Macelli, who has been trying to work very hard to make sure that in our opening, in our ability to hear and have the incredible community that most of us believe we have, that we have to open the space wider if we really are talking about participation. And what is that wider? And which comes up particularly when we're talking about open streets, because now we're talking about who on the street gets to say something, not just who in a community-based organization or a tenant association, but who on the streets. So that's kind of how we have it. And then we have basically an open mic. And what we'd like, even though I see Victoria and other people that are here, that we want to hear from people, even if you speak about your block, your street, that we want to bring people down to focus, not again on the I. This is me, where I am, because this is your neighborhood. You don't give up this being your neighborhood because you run for city council or you run for something. And then we will have several people that are going to tell us where are we going from here. And Ben is here, and why am I forgetting? I can't see my names here, but anyway, we'll say, where are we going from here and who can lead us there? And then we will tell each other how wonderful we've all been and we will close the meeting, but we will decide if we get someplace. How does that sound? Okay or not?
Sounds good.
Yeah, at least I see heads shaking. Okay. And Jerry, is this being taped?
Yes, it
TV
is.
Huh?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Jerry. So Jerry's there. I just wanted to make sure it's being taped. Okay. So, Andrew, Rudd, just give us some idea of what this public space to you're not an academic, you're a policymaker, right? What would you like to share with these people from Williamsburg Greenpoint? And by the way, the speaker he was bringing in that couldn't come tonight was the person that's working with us all the time from Transportation Alternatives. So it was very humorous that I went to the UN to get help, and they brought me back to a group that people are already working with here in Williamsburg. So Andrew.
Thanks, Jen. No, what, 2-3 minutes intro on this and back to
I
you.
think that's good. Up. Don't let him go over 5, Marie.
Yeah, she means that, and for good reason. Thanks, Jen. It's and I have a cat running around at my feet, so pardon the tail if it pops up. It's always tough to talk to a New York audience. You know, we're here, but we're not here. I think it's worth reminding New Yorkers that here we're quite blessed with public space. It's something we take for granted. Something like 45%, almost 50% of the city's area is public, in fact, whether it's streets, sidewalks, footpaths, parks, forest, green space, coast, whatever. That's for all of us. And we don't see necessarily problems. Well, we see qualitative problems, but we actually have the space with which to do something. At the UN Habitat, where I work, it's the UN's agency for cities, we're typically working with very fast-growing cities in the developing world that don't have much public space to begin with, whether it's sort of Chinese developer-funded super blocks with very tall towers, where most space is private, or informal settlements, aka slums, where 2% of land area is actually for street sidewalks. You can barely get around, much less get through, how do you say, an emergency vehicle. So it's a tough conversation I suppose, to have with a crowd that is used to an amenity that most of the rest of the world at this point is actually not providing for its citizens. But here we are, somewhat post-COVID, dealing with a proposal, an open streets proposal, that I think has taken us in the urban policy community a little bit by surprise, in the sense that it's more controversial than we expected, if I can be perfectly frank. For us as urban, you know, me, other urban planners, designers, architects, policymakers, it's a kind of given, in a way that in most cities in the world, certainly New York, the majority of us don't necessarily drive. So rights of way, public open spaces, streets and sidewalks, from our perspective, should go to the majority of the population. So if the majority don't drive, the majority of the space should logically therefore go to pedestrians, cyclists, small business owners, etc. And that certainly makes sense. I mean, if you look at studies done, the majority of motorists, 90% of motorist time is spent looking for parking. So we're looking for more democratic, more equitable, more efficient ways of sharing streets. I think during lockdown over the last year, for a lot of us, the importance of having public, open, and green space to get out into has been demonstrated like never before. But we've heard increasingly that the means through which New York has determined which spaces are open and which streets are open and not has not really been very consultative, and that the enforcement and governance of these spaces has been far from optimal. As Janet mentioned, I had hoped that transportation alternatives would be on this call. They have been, from my perspective, very effective advocates for this, as we would say, reallocation of public space in a more democratic means. Although, again, I think what we lack, and Jen has pointed to this, is some kind of protocol, some kind of forum or platform or space or time for the people who live in a very granular neighborhood to be able to come together and decide how the space is reallocated. I don't have very good answers for you in the sense that I don't have a protocol to be able to provide. Transportation Alternatives doesn't either. They have published a guidebook on open streets with a very generic set of questions that they believe cities should ask. And I suppose that's our starting point, and I will probably pass back to Jen at this point. Open streets is a concept we believe in quite deeply, but we acknowledge there isn't really a set process for how to decide where these open streets should be placed and how they should be managed to the maximal benefit of all residents. So we're very much open to trying to help develop this. Perhaps not the most natural partners in the sense that we work in cities not like New York typically, but we see the need. So
Thank you, Andrew.
5 minutes up.
She got you on 5 minutes, and you did a good job of setting the tone. And I think that if we don't have Saskia here from Prospect Heights, then we will go ahead. Eric, putting you on the seat. Where are we at in Williamsburg Greenpoint with this issue? How far have we gotten, and or have we gotten nowhere? I mean, where are we?
Well, in some places, thank you, Jan, first of all, and hello, everybody. Well, first of all, we're kind of at a low simmer war in some areas, particularly around McGorlick Park. So our focus has been mostly McGorlick Park area, Russell, Driggs, and then the Bedford corridor, or I'm sorry, the Berry corridor, particularly around North 7th up to the park. The program was started in a rush under de Blasio to make open space available to folks that had been cooped up for a few months in their apartments. And so open streets, the idea was to allow something that had already started before the pandemic, but open it up so that, folks could get out. But unfortunately, it was more of a top-down approach where streets were chosen without enough community input. Requests were made for particular streets at the beginning, but it was, as far as I can tell, first come, first serve. So whoever put in a request could get, could get their open street. And then that, although initially was, I would say for the first few weeks, maybe months, it seemed to be working okay. But then as we rolled into the summer, and, we had a lot of unrest around the George Floyd protests. And then we also had a lot of people that just wanted to go out and party, and, kind of abuse the open streets. Some of the restaurants and bars that were, trying to stay alive, just kind of let things go.
Going on or
and,
off or whatever.
I'm sorry.
Nothing, go on.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Anyway, so we started to get complaints from the from residents, mostly along Berry at first, the quality of life issues, where people were urinating on stoops, sitting on stoops, not moving for residents, just being generally rude, sometimes drunk. And these were, isolated incidents around, mostly around Berry Street. But then as we progressed into the last couple months, it became a real, I don't know, well, they call themselves Greenpoint natives, so we'll say nativist kind of vibe, where a lot of folks around McGorlick Park were like, people aren't using these streets. I don't understand why I have to deal with this. And then there were a lot of safety concerns around emergency vehicles not being able to get through. So initially we tried to just give voice to the people that had concerns, and we've had DOT at every meeting since October and even back in June. I think at the first meeting we had DOT there, and we've just come to an impasse where the quality of life issues are not, in the opinion of the folks that are upset about it, are not being abated. And there's been a lot of work on the pro open street side, and they're very well organized, and they're doing the best job that they can with little support from the city. But it's not something that I'm all for, volunteering, public citizens getting involved and, taking up the slack that government can't do. But at this point, we've been living with this for over a year, and it's time for the city to step in and to really organize it in a way that addresses community concerns, addresses the people that love open streets, increases the positives, and takes care of the negatives. And it's something that the community board took up because we were getting complaints, and we stepped into the vacuum between the two sides. But it's come to a point where I think we've kind of talked ourselves out, and I'm a little afraid that we may have talked ourselves too far. So that's the state of play in a nutshell. I could probably go on for another hour about all the different specific issues, but that's it in a nutshell. And I can answer any questions if I left stuff out. Jan?
Does anybody have any quick clarifying question that they want Eric to address? Nope, everybody's doesn't need clarification. Well,
I have a quick question. Can you talk to, it's Francois, Eric, can you talk to the liability issues surrounding open streets, please?
So
thank you, Francois.
Yeah, hi, Francois. It's the liability issues. So according to DOT, they accept the basic liability, but it's a little unclear, and we need to kind of, and it depends what you mean by liability. I mean, if you mean liability, an ambulance can't get through, and somebody is critically injured because that happens, although we have heard from the 9-4 that is not happening. I just want to be clear, but I'm just using that as an example. Or if I mean, somebody's injured on an open street or something like that. I mean, obviously the city has to take the responsibility, but I don't know. It's not an easy question for me to answer, Francois, because we haven't really gotten a clear answer from DOT, except that they have blanket.
Maybe I can answer the question.
Go, Sante, please.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer because when I follow the line, because it's been a little bit ambiguous. I believe what Francois is referring and correct me, Francois, if I'm wrong, I believe are referring if you are an organization that you are running an open street, because I assist to a conversation with Kyle Gorman from DOT, and what he was understood is that practically there was no coverage liability from the Department of Transportation, from the city. So whatever organization or block association or group of residents were taking on into the initiative of the open street, they were kind of on their own, you know? And is that what you are referring?
I mean, I think it's just the fact that the city, you know, has let liability fall on volunteers or put, you know, it's becoming a question about money to who is really out working on the open streets. And it's confusing. And I think if, you know, you're a volunteer, but you could possibly lose like your home or whatever savings you have, it just needs to be clarified. So
I think that's pretty clear,
but I
Francois.
would ask that the community board at the next transportation meeting could have the legal team from DOT there so that we could start to have this conversation, because I think with clarity, we'd be able to actually move forward with open space in our community.
Okay,
Posted something in the chat about liability that just passed.
I was on the top. Okay, so thank you very much. Now, Sante, is that we wanted to basically open up the discussion now to people first to really reflect on what if you were going to be, is there any reason, well, how do you think a decision should be made regarding your block where you live becoming an open street? What are the important elements to you? And I think, is Lisa, are you there, Bamonte?
I'm here, Jan.
Yep, I was hoping that you might kick off that discussion, but Sante, you're going to help facilitate from people just to speak really about your own block so we get kind of concrete. So we're
Sure.
we're going to decide that your block is going to be chosen. Somebody wants to use your block, Lisa.
Well, from a couple of people that, I mean, not talking about my block, but I know that there was a proposal put in for, let's say, Manhattan Avenue between Jackson and Withers. That was one that I had seen a while back. But I don't know who put that in or who requested that block, but there were people on the block before that and a couple of people on the block after that, and they weren't that happy about it, because then what happens is, you know, I think maybe Eric could answer this question. When they close a block down, then the traffic is diverted, and then the traffic is diverted to the other residential streets, which causes more congestion. I mean, you have buses, because Graham Avenue is closed. You have buses coming down Jackson Street trying to make turns up by Larmer. Sometimes you can't make the turn. There needs to be some type of better coordination, I think, when they do close a street down, you know? And I think that sometimes I do feel that it does cause a lot more congestion on the side streets. And the emergency vehicles are another issue. How do they get down? If you have barriers up, you know, believe it or not, a lot of people still have cars. Where do they park? You know, everything is so congested now with this proposal of metered parking under the bridge. You know, everything works hand in hand, I feel. You know, people I feel in the community have a right to have cars as well, you know, so we can't just, the open streets, I think, is a great idea, but I think there just needs to be a little bit of better planning and better thinking of how it's going to work and where they're going to put them to make everything flow in a better better way.
Thank you. Maria Leonzo, you want to say something?
I think that if they have that, there should be a certain hours it starts and certain hour that it finishes, because it does bring a lot of congestion to the other side streets. I don't think that someone should have something all day up until 12 or whatever time. It should be on time. Now, a certain time you could have it, and then it stops.
I
And
agree
Meg-
with that,
Huh?
I agree with that. Instead of having blocks closed or shut down for the whole entire weekend,
Yeah, it's really rough that weekend.
Anybody else about their block? Jane, what about your block? Right, go on.
Could I build upon something that Lisa Bemonte said, if you don't mind?
I would have you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not completely sure about what I'm doing, and I'm out in New Mexico, and I'm off in my own place. But when she talked about shutting down Manhattan Avenue between Jackson and Withers, what jumps
Right.
out to me, and I believe she alluded to this, but I want to make this very clear to people. Okay, so we have one block that's closed due to open restaurants, and that is on Graham Avenue. It's not starting at Metropolitan, it is one block to the north. Okay, so theoretically, what you could have happen if both of these things were approved, you would have the B43 have to turn at Metropolitan, go down Manhattan, and there you're going to encounter a bunch more blocks that are shut down due to open streets.
Correct.
Just to put that out there. And from personal observation, because I ride the B43 a lot, really, Manhattan Avenue is not designed to handle that bus. I mean, I've been in the bus, I've watched the driver make a turn. That's my own anecdotal thing, but I just wanted to give people an idea of what she's talking about, perhaps in more specific terms, using streets, Anyway, that's all.
Heather,
Thank
you're
you.
doing exactly what we hoped to hear. Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this my turn, Janice?
Go on, Sante. Take charge.
Yeah, I want to tap into, before I go to talk about my block association or some other block association, first, because the outreach committee start to do some work, and definitely I knew the portion of my community that I represent, so I knew several block association, and now becoming more coalesced, so they are really a neighbored entity, in a more larger way. But I want to say something about, because we can talk about Berry or other street or Metropolitan or other, and I've been very quiet for several months, observing, attending. I'm not against open street. I'm not in favor if that's create the issue of quality of life, and so this is one issue. I believe we went from an emergency measure, as Eric has mentioned, during the beginning of the pandemic. And then we have taken over this idea, let's call it even tactical urbanism, to be passed into actual a bill. So we went from tactical urbanism into a bill, and without really thinking the protocol and the consequences. And I'm going to tap what I believe. Definitely the traffic. I don't know where exactly or how, but I saw, even with my bike or riding my Vespa, there has been cases, where there was overwhelming traffic, and there is always traffic, but now that can generate more traffic. So this, I believe, a responsibility of the Department of Transportation that has not substantiated this beautiful initiative, graded need for open space, substituted by quantistic traffic study, precise analysis, of population and density, how many delivery we're gonna have. I asked once that actually there was a form done by DOT, but I believe my question was even answered. So I don't know if the that has been really done. I don't think it has been done because any study was kind of suspended. So I believe just this has been put in place and has been put in action. And so this one comment I could make. Then, as Erica said, quality of life is always an issue for our community, you know, and of course, people is never involved, doesn't even know how community board function. The moment is impact and it doesn't know how to communicate. I didn't even know myself how to communicate this. I'm learning along the way. I'm an immigrant, so I'm even not a native. I never thought I was a native. So there is so many issues, but definitely there are native Brooklynites, and because I'm a foreigner and my English is not perfect, every time I had to go on the dictionary to search the word. So, but whatever, native, there were articles in the New York Times, and I always heard it, native, you know, so these and other things without, but I believe we've been pointing at the word. But definitely there have been people who were born and raised here. I have neighbors here that have been here for 3-4 generations. Both house next to mine. So they've been here for 100 years, 120. I mean, it's incredible. They never thought to do any real estate speculation. They just lived here in the same house generation after generation. So there is people who has been impacted, I'm assuming, because other things have been overlapping. So the idea of the open space or the idea of having more park in that sense has been taken over by open restaurants, open culture. And I heard also using a lot of other language, and hopefully other people can comment later on, is about activating. What that means, we have taken this street where people, they used to know each other on that block, and maybe now I'm one of the hipster too, I would have to say, but people used to know each other for generations. All of a sudden, you know, a certain street become a destination place because they are the bar, they are the restaurant, and cafe, sidewalk cafe regulation have been completely suspended, and the open restaurant program take over with a serial activity that before were far more strictly regulated. Now they're not regulated with that. So I believe this has become a recipe for confrontation, for controversy, and can take over the beauty of open street, because it can definitely destroy the benefits of that, but definitely impact this community. And block association, and the reason why the Outreach Committee start doing work.
I think 5 minutes.
And well, I was trying to cover.
Santi, you can finish. You can finish.
Yeah, so going back to what are the issues that I've been observing with the open street, and hopefully that's what we should continue to discuss. But the block association, Hanoi and Greenpoint, Kent, Milton Street, Oak Street, somebody, not everybody who come from the Greenpoint Coalition of Block Association tonight, but I believe there was Susan Anderson. I don't know if there was Elizabeth Chernada, I cannot see. I will let them speak if they want to say something too, but definitely what will happen, to answer to your question, I believe that already had happened here when open culture, and people didn't know what it was open culture. There was a site here in Greenpoint on Noble Street, but open culture was potentially could have bring 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, potential amplify music directly into a residential neighborhood, you know? So that was an issue. And I believe that's what the fear of that diversion and changing quality of life has triggered this community to feel more coalized. And definitely, generally, to answer to what you were questioning me, I wish there were more organized block with literally people that reside there, because I believe the people that reside in the block should have really voice, because having a zip code, sharing a zip code, but being like 30 blocks away, you know, may not impact the same people the same way if we're talking about activity that can have impact on quality of life, like music, and becoming destination place.
Thank you.
That's all.
Perfect. Perfect. And I think he's alluding to something we might want to recommend at the end. We have a lot of CDCs in our communities. They could be helping people organize block associations, because people really are going to need to be organized, given not just open streets, but all these things. People have to be better organized than they are right now in terms of having any voice in many places. I think that's what's coming up. But Susan Anderson, are you willing to speak? I see your name there, but Susan, are you there? Guess not. She's on mute. She's on
Mute.
mute.
I'm sorry. I was trying to frantically find my my
I understand it
icon.
very well, Susan.
Right. So so I live over on Oak Street, and you know, was recently pulled into the conversation about open streets over on West Street with Sante and you know and a few other neighbors as well. I think that, you know, it's a wonderful idea. I think that especially during the past year when, you know, everybody desperately needed, you know, outdoor space and the ability to get out of our homes during the pandemic times, it was absolutely critical. Um, but as you know, we began the conversation in terms of how this might happen over on West Street. You know, some of the issues that we discussed and wanted to approach was clearly engaging everybody who would be impacted on it along on the blocks, do it in a very methodical, you know, careful manner. But then the other issue that came out was that of liability, and I'm so glad that Francois and Sante raised that question, because we are talking about open streets where the program lasts an entire day. It could be 8, 9, 10 hours during a stretch of a day. It's not run by the city. It's actually run on the backs of volunteers and perhaps, you know, some community organizations. And if something, God forbid, happens, you know, I mean, we had this conversation with the DOT and we were advised, don't worry, don't worry. If something happens, let's say a car crashes into a barrier and somebody gets hurt, they'll sue the city, they'll sue the deep pockets. I would beg to differ. I think they'll sue everybody. And we would all stand to be at risk, even though we'll be, you know, volunteering our time and effort for something that would be great for the community. So the question that we put to them was, you know, how can you protect us if we were to do this for the sake of our community? You know, to make things better for our community. And the answer came back was zero. They pointed us to the legislation, you know, the link that I put into the chat. And so that was the answer. It wasn't the answer. That was an umbrella. It was just simply making open streets permanent. It spoke nothing to liability. And then it was like, well, okay, maybe you could get funding and buy your own insurance. That's not an answer. So I would say this is something that, you know, we all need to really think about. As well as, of course, some of, you know, many of the other issues that people have raised. But this really goes to the heart of putting risk to be borne by residents and small community organizations. I mean, I don't know about others, but I would be hard pressed to think of what community organization in our neighborhood can stand the risk of getting sued and having their insurance policies getting jacked up and not being able to do what the mission is. So I would love to hear from, you know, people who've really thought about this. There are other people and organizations in our community who have gone down this road far longer than I have. What's gotten you comfortable? I would love to hear so that I can get comfortable too. Thank you.
Kate Hart has her hand up.
Can't
Hi,
hear you.
Jan, you're actually muted.
Deborah, and then Eric. And I saw another hand. Yeah, go on. Deborah?
Kate Horowitz had her hand up also.
Okay, and Kate. and then after that, Deborah, Eric, then Kate. I'm not hearing any. Why am I not hearing you, Deborah?
Sorry. I live on Morgan Avenue between Nassau and Driggs. And the issue of open streets, I benefited from it quite a bit. However, I do understand that, as has been stated, this was originally an emergency, it rolled out as an emergency method, and it has now become permanent. Well, what has happened with that is no one really knows who's in charge. And you have one group of volunteers deploys it one way, another group does it another way. The community members who live and park on the street have their opinions, and they think that they should have been heard, and they don't feel heard. And then you have, people who are attempting to enjoy the open streets, and confrontations happen, or moving barriers. And that has gotten very heated on Driggs, where I would walk down the park to down the street to McGorlick Park, and I would move a barrier back into place, and I'd be yelled at for moving it back into place. And I think that the rollout and the fact that there are no real estate.
I don't know.
Can't hear you.
Deborah, you went silent.
And we did not turn you off. You've been good.
To get it resolved, that there's some sort of system in place where there could be mediation.
That's very good. Thank you, Deborah. Who else? We said Eric?
Hi, thank you for that, Deborah. I just wanted to say, another confusing part of this is there's open streets program, there's open restaurants, there's open culture streets. So there's 3 different things that are happening, and they're getting conflated, but they don't all operate in the same way, although they're kind of headed by the same department. So as we move into figuring out what this legislation means and what's happening with the open restaurants, I've had conversations with DOT about what the long-term open restaurant program is going to be. It's going to have to be run somewhat like sidewalk cafes are run through the SLA. And so there's a lot of fine tuning to do now. And actually the legislation, just on a cursory reading, I'm hoping will bring us to what Deborah was talking about, like a mediation, some way for things to be codified so that there is a clear way to lodge a grievance, a clear way for it to be addressed, and some way for it to be resolved. Because right now, people have said that they haven't been heard, but now everyone's been heard. But I think the big frustration is that there's no action. So I don't know. That was it. But I wanted I raised my hand to make that clarification about the 3 different open programs, because they're functioning in different ways, and they're somewhat in conflict with each other and sometimes not, like the open culture streets and whatever. So that's it. I just wanted to make that point. So that's something that we're considering getting resolved to.
Katie Horowitz? Katie
Yes.
Horowitz.
Thanks, Jen. Am I echoing for you?
Yes, you are echoing.
Everybody needs to mute.
Great, thanks. So I don't want to speak too long about it because I feel like most people want to express their concerns about not necessarily as managers, but Susan, I wanted to share with you about the liability. Is you're right, there isn't actually language in the legislation. They do generally refer to processes and additional resources. So it's really kind of the way that the city council members, Carolina Rivera as well, talking about it and have said that the legislation does indeed protect volunteers from liability issues. So it's more about, hopefully as those processes and resources are more clearly defined following up the bill, that it will be included in that. But, I don't know if we've talked about it before, but I'm sure you've noticed the changes in liability between the city agencies and nonprofits, going back the last 15 years, where slowly the law department has been taking away the liability from the city and putting it on their community partners. So it's not distinct to open streets. It's actually broadly across public spaces in general. Most parks conservancies have had a liability placed on them to the point where some of them have collapsed or not renewing their agreements. Community gardens have also been closing because of the risk being put on them. So this is a much larger issue than just open streets. And it's the way that the city, especially under the de Blasio administration, has been putting risk. And so any parks and advocate has been pushing the new leaders, any mayor candidates to ensure that they will support the nonprofit community as they on public service management with the city and fill those gaps in public services. And it's something that, we've talked to our city council candidates as well, that this is an important issue for nonprofits. And I think it's similar to what you're feeling, Susan, with the open streets liability.
Also, there is to comment, Kathy, about that you see, if when organization organize, I don't know, cleaning the park or other activity, they're kind of more modest and definitely they're exposed to less dangers. But this type of activity where you have to monitor and control and be responsible of a street where, there are controversy, people has to drive with car or people going there because they're restaurant and drinking could generate into, it's a huge responsibility in comparison to any other activity that we could have done in parks, for the community.
That's true. I mean, it's not much different than friends groups, right? I mean, there have been lawsuits against North Brooklyn friends groups as well, just from volunteer activities. So I don't think it's distinct to open streets. I think it's really how, things that happen when you, participate in public space.
Well, actually, I would, if I could just jump in for a moment, I would dare say that the difference is that when a friends group goes out and does the cleanup, for example, you're out there for a certain amount of time and you're monitored, you're supervised, you're managed. But open streets, there are hours upon end where, I don't know if that's how, Berry was run, where you would actually have, monitors out there who are responsible for what happens on the street every hour, but I doubt it. And I would, it's a lot to bear for volunteers and community organizations.
Thank you. But whoever is speaking, please try to get called on. This is Jan. And I want to just say is that we seem to be on that road that those of us that are a bit older may remember. And this is a really critical issue. So with public, what is public? Because the reality is people used to have all kinds of things that were public, and then insurance companies came in and we lost our camps, all kinds of spaces have been lost that people can't use because of that. So what is the answer is really a big question. I want to just say to you is that it's been heartbreaking to see the loss of public and the control of the insurance companies at deciding what this all should be and who should do it. Marty, you're in my age group, so you know what I mean. I mean, the amount of places that were here And I think every time we're trying to do something at a public housing tenant in the buildings or in the community centers, oh no, if you don't have this kind of insurance and that kind of insurance, there has to be something new here because it's really limiting the possibilities of space of what people need. So I just want to put that out. I think it's an important issue, but which way you go with it also, I think, has to be decided. Who also had their hand up next? Go on, my dear. I think we have yet to meet Kevin.
Hello, hey everybody. Kevin Lachera over in Greenpoint. Thank you, Jan, and the Women's Committee, obviously, for putting this together. I feel like I've been on a lot of them between transportation, but you know, there's a lot of folks that care about this, so I'm happy to be here and talking about it. And so there's just a couple of things. You know, I just think about what Sante was saying. You know, that this was an emergency response, and it was. You know, I think very quickly we were confronted as a neighborhood with how unprepared we were for COVID on so many different fronts, whether that was in terms of food security or whether that was in terms of, you know, the homeless folks that live in our neighborhood, or, you know, the fact that we don't have a hospital in the community. The closest one is Woodhull. You know, all these sorts of things were coming up, you know, and hitting us one after the other, after the other, after the other. And obviously one of those things amongst many, many, many things was the fact that we're a neighborhood with some of the least amount of open space per person of any neighborhood in the city. And there's a lot of folks that are on this call who I have great respect for, and, who've done such incredible work for that exact topic, for, you know, on that exact reason. With Bushwick Inlet Park, you know, Marsha P. Johnson, Street Safe, you know, so on and so on. All the different, you know, Deb's work with the Sewer Fund and the Creek, you know, all of these places and spaces. And so I think that that's something that's really important to keep in mind, that like that, even though COVID may be coming to an end, like this emergency is not done. I mean, you know, Bushwick Inlet Park's having a rally on Wednesday to call for, you know, the fact that 2/3 of the park has still not been given to us 20 years later. You know, these crises are not over once we stop wearing masks. They're going to continue. And one of those crises is the lack of open space. And another one is, you know, quite frankly, street safety. And, you know, with the loss of Matthew Jensen last week in a hit and run, you know, one of the things that we do know is that these open streets greatly reduce traffic deaths. You know, and obviously there are places in our community where people are going to have to use their cars and store their cars. I don't think anybody, you know, doesn't understand that. But, you know, we are hitting record numbers of people in North Brooklyn and across the entire city riding bikes and traveling by bike. You know, I live on Meserole Avenue, and I think that, you know, when I grew up here, one of the things that I was told time and time again was like McGinnis Boulevard was the edge of the world. Like if you leave the house, my dad would have nightmares, you know, that somebody would leave the door open, I would run out and get hit and killed on McGinnis Boulevard. And so these types of things, these types of, you know, interventions that we are able to do are important and matter. You know, that's quality of life too. You know, that's quality of life too, not to be hit and killed by a car or a truck, to be able to ride your bike safely from one place to the other. And I think that, you know, in terms of this idea that, you know, folks, you know, last summer was a lot. And I think that, you know, I don't think you'd find people even, you know, that are the most committed to the open streets that would dispute that. Something that's important to note, you know, I think is that basically stoppage in terms of enforcing those quality of life issues. They stopped enforcing, you know, when folks were in the street. You know, and all these regular processes across the board, every single one of them, everything ground down to a halt. And so as those resources come back to this city, you know, whether that is SLA, whether that is NYPD, whether that is regular DSNY service, like I think the idea that holding up last summer as like the be all end all example of what this is and could be, and saying, so therefore we shouldn't have it, or whatever it may be, I don't think is accurate. I mean, I think that it's accurate to that summer, but I mean, I'd been in my house for 85 days come May of last year. I'm immunocompromised. It was the first time I was out, you know, come May and June. And so many people were in that same boat. And that doesn't excuse bad behavior, but I think that, again, it's part of the reality of this, you know, and I think that I want the DOT to do more. I want electeds to do more. But, you know, as somebody who has been doing this sort of stuff now for not as long as most of you, but, you know, for a little while, the outreach that I saw from DOT on this and the engagement and the conversation and like the fact that this was, you know, at transportation committee after transportation committee after transportation committee, there's no other issue that's been like that, you know, and that's because of its controversy, but it's like, there's been a lot of avenues for people to have their voice heard. There should be more. You know, again, I think I'm in all these meetings. I think there should be more. I think there should be more transparency and more outreach and, you know, and all these sorts of things. You know, I think that there are hundreds of volunteers that have been doing this work for a year that live in those areas, that live in this community, that are committed to this and care about this. And a lot of them are younger people, you know, and, you know, Jan, one of the things that you just said right before I came on here, but was, you know, that, you know, some of the older folks that are on this board that have been doing this work for a long time, that have made so many incredible, that have built the foundation that the rest of us are standing on, to be quite frank, you know, and when I think about, you know, this thing came out of an emergency, you know, what I think about is that the major emergencies that are facing this community in the long term are related to climate emergency. You know, being a neighborhood surrounded by water on three sides and a neighborhood that has faced the devastation of the fossil fuel industries, the oil spill, all these sorts of things, Meeker, the highway, the BQE, all these traffic deaths after deaths after deaths, you know, and I think that what I would ask to those folks that have been doing this work for so long is, you know, is what type of community do you want to leave for us, the younger people that are doing this work now, that are deeply grateful and indebted to the work that you've done. And I think that open streets are a part of that. You know, and that's, you know, I am for traffic studies. I am for getting the data from DOT. I am for more engagement. That's why I'm here, and grateful for the time in this space. But these were just things that were on my mind as I was hearing everybody discuss, and just, you know, so that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything before we go into what next, is there anybody that has something to say that didn't get to say it?
I'd like to say something, Jan.
Good, go on.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Victoria Cambron is here. I'm a lifelong Greenpoint resident. Any of you don't know. And so one thing that I always want to point out with any conversation, whether it's open streets, park space, environmentalism, transportation, whatever have you, the one thing that our community does over and over and over again, to the great detriment of those neighbors who are voiceless, is not discuss our privilege. And it is extremely privileged to talk about environmentalism and open streets without the people in the room who have full-time jobs, who don't speak English, who are homeless, who are disadvantaged, and who don't have the time to come on WebEx or Zoom to have these conversations and these charrettes. And it's that privilege that is extremely overwhelming and is really good at shouting down voiceless people. And I think we have to step back and we have to remember that privilege over and over again. I bring it up a lot because it needs to be brought up a lot. And for young, able-bodied men who are the predominant benefactors of this culture, Open Streets is a beautiful program, but step back and talk to the people who are voiceless. Please do not ignore Black and brown neighbors. Do not ignore your immigrant neighbors. And do not ignore people who, it seems like this conversation is being pitted from young to old, or young against old. I'm not old. I don't think I'm old. But I do like to remember people who don't look like me, who aren't able-bodied like me, and who don't have the same privileges that I do. And I think we need to remember that. So please, if you're an able-bodied white man coming to a women's issues committee meeting, please step back and allow those other voices to speak. Thank you.
Don't step back today because this is an open time that everybody was invited to. Thank you, Victoria. Who's raising their hand?
Benjamin?
Go on.
It's Ben. Yeah. Hi.
Go on, Ben.
Thank you. I want to sort of agree with Victoria about that. Having on the outreach question, having worked on participatory budgeting for the past 10 years, there can never be too much outreach. There's never enough, and there can never be too much. You really have to make an effort, and there has been a lot of conversations, but I think, yeah, we're not talking to all the people. So the legislation is a step forward that Carlina talked about. I don't see anything about liability there. I know Carlina said it would be. You know, I think one thing we can all learn about local laws is from the time they're passed until they're enacted, a lot happens. You notice that Bill says it's 120 days or sooner if the DOT wants it, but laws tend to be broad strokes, and it requires bureaucrats to write the details. So there's still advocacy opportunities and clarifications and details to work out. I think that open streets is a concept that's been around a long time, and yeah, we did enact it in a pandemic, and now we want to make it permanent, and we need a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do that. So thank you for convening this discussion. I think I said the council member's office is planning to continue it in the ways that Eric Rosita started, and I hope to do that. I had somebody ring my doorbell, so I better go check that. But I'll be right. So that's all I wanted to say, really offhand. But I'll hang around.
Dan, you're muted.
Because Eric keeps telling me to mute, unmute, and mute. So the question is, we're not hearing anything startling, right? This is kind of what the protocol is exactly is not clear. What the liability is, that question, but so that this doesn't seem to be. But nobody disagrees that the people that are affected should be consulted. Is that true?
Could I build upon Vic's point at some point?
Who's speaking?
Heather.
Yes, you can. Let me just finish that point, Heather. Is that so? One is we have to make sure. Did we hear anything new? Did we hear, or are we still seeing that what this protocol should be really has to be specified? Because we had a lot of questions around it, and obviously, but nobody's disagreeing that the people affected should be involved. They're asking how and how to make sure that people that normally don't get reached out to are reached out to, that there has to be a broader sweep, but everybody's saying that this is a decision that has to be handled at the local level. Is that right? Is anybody disagree?
Yes.
Katie? And then back to Heather.
Yes, absolutely. And there he is. And Ben, you know, I think it's really wonderful to hear that Steve Levin is going to be bringing folks together, because, you know, I know he's supportive of open streets, and I think also, you know, was part of the help pass the legislation. But I think that we could have used some of his help in bringing some of these voices together the last few months. And so if he's going to be doing that, I think that's going to be really helpful. So happy to work with you on that. So thank you.
So are people clear on the fact that Steve Levin's office, is this right, Ben, is establishing a committee? Is that right? That's going to work on some of these issues to flesh out?
Yes, as I said, when Eric wanted to do a subcommittee in transportation, that didn't happen. I talked to him and decided since we would take that on in the office. So I have it's been a little complicated the first couple of days, but we're scheduling some key people to talk and then to expand that.
And will that include the Antonio's part of the district too?
Well, yeah, as much as we need, yeah, we'll talk to him and make sure that their voices are there.
So people that want to continue to work on what should happen, what a protocol should look like, because I think that that's really the challenge to the not to the transportation committee, because really even the Women's Issues Committee, we're supposed to hear from what people want, but people that care about what this protocol is and have ideas can begin to formulate that and get that to Ben at the councilman's office and the committee, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd
so
like to add one other comment, if I may. I also have another meeting, I'm afraid, but I can hang out a little bit. But I just want to say that in the beginning, when Open Streets were suggested, the DOT reached out to us and other offices and like, please suggest Open Streets. And if we got a person said, yes, let's make this an open street. Let's make Russell from Driggs to Nassau an open street. We said, okay, we'll put it on the list. We did not, because we had a deadline. It was moving very fast. We didn't survey people. We didn't go out any further. So we sort of, that was a stumble certainly on our part due to the timing and the way it was working. So not that I'm just saying that that's something we've learned now, is that when that process happens, it needs to be more fully vetted than it was, for sure.
And people have been saying for a while, and I know Marty Needleman's with me on this, is that, and I've talked to Ben, extremely fragmented in Williamsburg Greenpoint. You have participatory budgets that do one thing. You have a community board that comes up with an annual budget for the neighborhood that's doing something else. You have council people that do their own thing. We have CDCs that kind of do their own thing. We're saying we have some big heavy duty players, and you have all this apparatus around parks. There doesn't seem to be a clear convening of all these players when things are done. And I'm just saying, if any issue is looking like it is it's going to be a horrible thing if this community doesn't come more coalesce around looking at what its 5-year strategic plan is and where it's going and how it's going, because it's just like we're running off. Was that you, Sante, that said that some people said we should just give Williamsburg Greenpoint over to the gentrifiers because then we can save the other neighborhoods that are all around us? Somebody said this. So I'm just saying is that I think we're getting a clear picture, which you all know, and there are people that have been trying to bring these different threads together so that we can look at the environment and the parks and the jobs, but in a much more coherent way, because this is really is enough to drive people pretty crazy, I would say.
Also, Janice, going back to protocols, and the Block Association, for example, here in Greenpoint, even a lot of people is not involved, but indirectly, Block Association, they have a function in terms of how they serve the community, because they represent people because of age, because of language, because they are busy, and even if they don't appear, but you can have their signature, you can inform them and you represent them. This happened at least in the portion of my community, and I believe Laura Hoffman was asking on the chat, but this definitely the idea of having Block Association. Survey should be building number by building number, floor by floor. Here, the Block Association can have not a petition, can literally have a census, knowing who is the owner, what's the phone number, who is the tenant, who likes it, who doesn't like it. And I believe for an activity of this type, where what is in question is quality of life, is the fact that's your house, and if it's going to be turned into a party with people dancing and singing, which is beautiful if you don't live there and if you don't want to be intruded into your home, I believe the key is to have survey. They are so specific, so dedicated. They literally are census door by door. If you don't have that, sorry, the zip code, I don't think is enough, and it's going to create controversy, and it's going to create division and confrontation and all the things we have seen.
So I think some people have talked about how can we begin to strategize some of these issues, whether it's the community board or whatever, that our existing institutions, even the CDCs, why are they not organizing block associations? You know, why are we not coming up with a plan of what we need? Why are we not having one conference once a year where we lay out what's working, what the problems are? Why is it that we're not trying to build on? Because I would say that maybe I'm wrong, and Eric will be able to jump on me, but Prospect Heights sounds like they've had a fairly successful ability to work on this open space, but they have one big coalition that all the small groups and all that are a part of. That doesn't mean they don't have any power, but they seem to have a coherent way of organizing. And that's something to look at. We have a million different voices, and then we have all the people that are not in any voice, which is what Victoria was just talking about. And of course, we could all stop doing anything right now if we look at who all is not included. Is how do you include people and what does it mean? And right now, it's a pretty if you want to get involved in Williamsburg politically, it's a pretty complicated way to go. So I just want to say that I think one of the directions that we're looking at is that we need to work across committees at the community board, because obviously transportation, they don't handle all the issues that we're talking about here. And then you have Parks and Recreation. What's their responsibility? You know, I mean, how does this really all work will take a lot more thought in my mind. But people can jump all over me. I can take it. So, Toby, I see you. Do you have any comments that you'd like to add
Yeah,
on
and
open space?
but I would say that and I was waiting to see how the different committees sort of arrange themselves around this issue, because I know when Sante and I spoke originally, transportation wanted to take the lead, but it's having a tremendous effect on people's businesses as well. And, I've gotten calls and anecdotally, there's a lot of quality of life issues, and also for small businesses that have been struggling, all this activity in front, streets closure, it's a very, like you point out, Janice, it's a very, very complicated issue. And maybe I don't know what the policy right now is about in-person meetings, because the problem is when you do multiple committees on a Zoom, on a WebEx, it's just a lot of people, and it's a little bit difficult. I mean, the last community board meeting, I ended up getting off at like 10 after 10. I don't know what time the community board ended. The meeting ended. It was very, very late.
12.
Oh, it ended 12. I got off like 10:30. It was just, had a very long day and it was very rough. So, I mean, this is a major issue, and maybe something has to be hosted outdoors. Even maybe we should host something in McCarran Park and figure out a way for people to give their input, because this is a very complicated issue affecting a lot of people. And we need to make sure that everyone's getting a chance to voice their thoughts. And maybe it's done in a public forum outdoors where people can, there's sections, so that the Economic Development Committee has a table, and the women's issues has a table, and transportation has a table. And then after that, we can caucus on the overall feedback from the community. And that's one idea that I had.
Thank you, Toby. You always have good ideas. And as we know, the economic factor is one of the main driving factors of this whole open streets. So not to hear the businesses, not to get their voices in, obviously would be a major mistake. So we have a lot of voices that need to be heard. But
maybe we could, Janice, what my thought was, maybe we could actually write a letter, as whoever's on this call from the community the community board that wants to be part of it. I see Sante's on, representing the outreach committee. I would participate on behalf of the economic development, obviously women's issues. I see other members on different committees, including transportation. And
environment's here. Yeah.
Put forth a joint letter to Dialis and Jerry and ask that there be a date chosen in coordination with, if we need a permit from the Parks Department, and we do an outdoor meeting to discuss this. I think it's that critical an issue. So that would be my proposal, that we literally pen a letter, and
because we're going to end in about 5 minutes. because we're getting to 7:30. So, but people, we have several ideas on the floor. What do people think of Toby's idea? Because
So,
we don't,
Jan,
as somebody said, yeah, go
Jan,
on.
it's Francoise. So I just want to say that I had actually requested that from DOT to do a meeting specifically focusing on our Polish community, because they were also having a challenging time with the North Berry Street. So I think that's a conversation we could kind of pick up. I think at some point DOT just stopped kind of engaging with our community. And then I just kind of want to go back to what Victoria said, and I also don't know if Heather got the opportunity to speak.
I did not.
Okay.
Oh, yes, Heather, I'm sorry.
So, I think part of why we wanted this to be a Women's Issues Committee meeting is that, I'm going to read the stats from UN Women, over 70% of women of all ages reported experiencing some form of sexual harassment in public spaces. Over 95% of women of all ages did not report their experiences. So as a women's issue committee, I really think this has to be addressed. Women do not feel safe in our open streets, specifically North Berry. And I know that people say, well, don't use last summer as a marking point, but that's all we have. And people are suffering right now from serious trauma and PTSD from what went on in front of their homes or on their blocks. And for this program to successfully move forward, we need to address the trauma that happened to women in our community. We need to address how this is impacting our small businesses. Their voices aren't at the table. These are the same voices that are constantly there. And yes, we do outreach within the community, but we need to have, sorry, naked child going off video. We need to have real outreach, and that's inclusive to everybody.
Is there anybody that disagrees with that as a principle of what we're doing?
I would like to build upon it a little bit.
Okay, Heather.
Okay, the one demographic that Victoria dropped was women with children. Okay, she covered homelessness, or I think Kevin Lachera covered homelessness. She's talking, she listed those with disabilities, and I'm throwing in women because frankly, if you cover one, you cover all in terms of interest in how to use space. And our public spaces were never designed by or for the use of any of these groups. Let's be perfectly clear there. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that in. And if I could put this out there, because I do not live off of McGolrick and I do not live off of Berry. I live over by Laura Hoffman in the north end of Greenpoint. I like to call it Pulaski Heights. As an observer, watching what streets were selected in the neighborhoods, it's very interesting to me. Because frankly, my end of the community does not have much of any open space. Yes, we've got the nature walk on the premises of a sewage treatment plant, but for me, that's not really covering it. When you talk about perhaps going bottom up as opposed to, how did Eric put it here, top down approach? And Eric has heard this from me. I've consulted Laura about this. Barbara McGlamory is not present. But, as a resident of that community, I've noticed that, for example, DuPont Street, which is adjacent to Barge Park, is basically a street that's not even used, okay? It is used, or if it is, it's to work on cars and leave trash. Now, Barbara McGlamory contacted me about doing gardening over there to make it nicer and more presentable. So then it crosses my mind that perhaps that would be an excellent candidate for an open street. Perhaps not permanently, but on weekends, you could shut off a street that is adjacent to Barge Park for cleanups, for gardening, for people to play in. Do you see where I'm going here? I feel like this is an organic approach, and I would very much like to go forward with this, and I've talked to Laura about it. But until we get the mechanics of this down and until we get the, for want of a better way, acrimony dialed down, I just don't want to go there.
Well, I hope you feel tonight, Heather,
I
that
think we've taken a step forward, but I just wanted
Thank you.
to.
Thank you. And I
give
think
an
you
alternative.
also, but you're illustrating how creative this community is. See, on one hand, you have people that are policymakers and structures and that know the city agencies or know the businesses like Toby. On the other hand, you're getting an idea. You're looking at, let's map out areas that are potential that wouldn't create so much acrimony or difficulty. So people walking around and identifying areas, just like all the people, women around the world that are mapping unsafe places in cities, and now even have apps to do that. That's a good thing. So I'm saying I think it's getting creative. I want to just because I think it's at 7:32, and
Okay.
I'm saying unless there's some idea, we seem to have several. Because obviously we are, the Women's Committee is working with the Transportation Committee, working with Toby. We'll follow up with Toby. And I think the idea, unless there are people that are from the community board heading up committees that don't agree with the recommendation from Toby, which you don't have, you could say here because this is a safe space now that we are not being difficult with each other. We have an idea at least of another step to take. And I also hear that a lot of people.
I also wanted to offer that. I don't know to what extent and how we would work out the logistics, but we have a very large ballroom that's about 7,000 square feet. So it would, at the Williamsburg Hotel, we could also host it there. It lends itself to a fairly socially distanced interaction. But of course, if we did it outdoors, I'm sure people would be much more comfortable and you would have much more space, whether it be in the park. And so, you know.
And I've worked with Toby before, because so when she decides she's going to do something, she really does it. So there, you're talking about two possibilities that we can follow up and talk to each other about, Eric and Asante.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Toby.
And Steve, you're not saying anything, but we're speaking
Steve,
for
do
you.
you want on this little group? Steve, could we count on you?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great idea.
If the four of
both
us
to
just
bring-
tomorrow,
yeah.
we could write a very short letter that we send to Dialis and ask for a date. I actually have a committee meeting on the 14th, which is a Monday of June, which I would offer up, or the 16th of June, I would offer up that date. But I think an outdoor meeting makes a lot of sense. We could use the Williamsburg Hotel as a backup if it's raining. But I think that it's really critical that we give people a forum and that we set it up with tables so all the committees who want to participate are much more accessible than what we are on a Zoom or WebEx call. It's just doesn't lend itself to the right kind of communication.
And I think, can I just add on the guidelines to this meeting? Because you had the strong voices saying, well, we want to make sure that we're talking to a very diverse group of people. So the people that are saying that and that have ideas about what you think, what you yourself can do, because people have to take personal responsibilities. If people knew how to do this, they would have been doing it probably. But if you don't, if you know how to do it, you have to monitor. You have to help work with whatever we're doing to make sure that people are being reached out to that normally wouldn't be. So I just want to put down that everybody that's here, you know, you don't have to sign on for your life, but let's assume that there's a group of people here and anybody that is on this list that came tonight that doesn't want to be further involved, you could just write that in the chat. Please leave me out. Don't want that, you know, and that's fine. But I think we're saying it's time to move ahead. This topic is going to keep moving. And you have political people running for office right now. They're hearing, and I want to appreciate Victoria and Ben and others that are looking at these issues, you know, as their campaigns too. Appreciate that and the time. And I think we have a district leader on the board, right, Katie? I don't always get everybody's names right, as Jane will remind me, but did I get something wrong? Anyway, so thank you for being here. And I think we've gone as far as we can. Is that okay? Can we give any appreciation now? Remember, we said we're going to start being nice to each other. We are not going to be Donald Trump. We are not turning this community into Trump people. And
Thank you, Jan.
I mean in behavior, but any appreciations that anybody you'd like to appreciate before we get off, just very quickly. I want to appreciate Katie. What?
I said I think Jane Poole is amazing. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. Thank you, Jan, for putting this together.
No,
And
I think Jane Poole is.
and everyone else from the community board.
Yes. And I just want to, I appreciate the people that will come to meeting after meeting, as you said you've done, because you are passionately care about this issue. And it does matter, but I also care about people that are speaking up from a harder place. Heather, Susan, and I know Sante is trying very hard to add a new level of understanding of what we need to do to be good about outreach. So
If
that's
I could say, I just appreciate Laura Hoffman.
Where is she?
considerably.
I love her to death, but I did.
I think she might have disappeared, but that's okay. You've got her apprentice.
It's all right. Laura Hoffman is a wonderful visionary for a lot of us.
And she's been a great sounding board for me in terms of my part of the community. It's institutional knowledge, and she has a ton of compassion, and I really appreciate it.
Hear, hear. Anybody else?
Jan, I would like to really appreciate all the work that you have done for women, not just in our community, but around the world, and your insight that you have brought. I think this is a much bigger conversation that we will have to continue to have. So thank you.
Thank you. And I know it's
Jan,
Marty's.
if I could just quickly,
Go on, Eric.
Jen, Jen, I just want to thank you for putting this on the Women's Committee agenda. I had a mini meltdown about 2 full board meetings ago saying that things were getting a little too dangerous, and Jan was the first one to reach out and offer to be another voice on the community board to take it out of transportation and make it more community, broaden it around the community. And I really appreciate Jan for that, and everybody on this call that's done the work to try to bring us a little further to peace and something positive ultimately. Thank you, everybody.
I also want to thank Jan. I thought it was a crazy idea to do this because I felt like people weren't hearing each other, and I'm happy to sit at your feet and keep learning. And I like and care about a lot of people who are disagreeing about this topic, but it's just great to hear you did create a place for productive conversation. I'm amazed.
Thank you.
And Laura Hoffman. Laura Hoffman.
Okay. I think we've done it. Thank you all, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Janice. I want to say the long conversation that we had, thank you for, no, really, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your, community experience. I believe that's what we needed here. And, really, that's very important. Hopefully, this is probably the first episode of a more needed conversation. Hopefully they can happen, within this tone and become productive for the community. And thank you to Laura Hoffman. I wish I would have heard her voice for being a native Greenpointer. Thank you. Thank you.
You're muted, Jan.
Jan, you're muted.
I was going to say, you can create a safe space yourself in every meeting if you use the basic agreements and get people to decide. If we did it at our community board, frankly, that it would help a bit. It's not that we're not nice at the community board. but it gets really boring too when we're just being nice and we're not really speaking. So I hear this thing is echoing. So thank you all. Use the basic agreement.